The emergency session hall buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from across the galaxy gathered. Ambassador Zexhai of the Vorthan Empire adjusted his crystalline breathing apparatus, watching the massive holographic display show empty star charts where human colonies once thrived with activity. 17 standard cycles, announced High Arbiter Kolthara, her four arms gesturing toward the data streams. 17 cycles since we last detected any human communication, trade vessel, or diplomatic contact. Their entire species has simply vanished from galactic affairs. The murmurs grew louder among the assembled delegates. The Galactic Council had governed interstellar relations for over 3,000 years, but never had they faced a situation like this. Species had gone extinct, yes. Civilizations had collapsed, certainly. But an entire spacefaring species simply disappearing without explanation, that was unprecedented. Senator Vrex of the Altarian Republic stood, his massive frame casting shadows across the chamber floor. Perhaps they encountered some catastrophe, disease, natural disaster, internal war. Their last known communications mentioned nothing unusual, but... No, interrupted Dr. Yelendra from the Scientific Consortium. Her tentacles curled with anxiety as she manipulated her data tablet. We've monitored their star systems. No signs of planetary destruction, no debris fields suggesting massive conflicts. Their colonies appear intact, but completely silent. Ships remain in orbit around their worlds, but they don't respond to any communication attempts. Ambassador Thex leaned forward in his hover chair, his insectoid features clicking with concern. My traders report their merchant vessels still follow scheduled routes. Automated systems appear functional, but no crew has been seen on any ship for months. When our people attempted to board one of their vessels near the Rigel system, they found it completely empty. The silence that followed was deafening. Empty ships following trade routes. Colonies that showed life signs but no communication. It defied every pattern the galaxy had ever known. There's something else, Dr. Yelendra continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Our long-range sensors detected something 3 days ago, multiple human fleet movements across several sectors, large formations of their warships, moving with purpose but maintaining complete radio silence. High Arbiter Kolthara's primary eyes fixed on the scientist. Warships, moving where? Unknown. They disappeared from our tracking systems after entering what we believe are previously unknown hyperspace corridors. Our navigational computers can't even plot their routes. The implications hung heavy in the chamber. Humanity had always been the galaxy's newest members, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 2 centuries ago. They were considered energetic but naive, eager to trade and learn from older civilizations. Their military was respected but not feared, certainly not compared to the vast armadas of the Vorthan Empire or the technological superiority of the Quantum Collective. But now, their silence spoke louder than any threat ever could. The question, said Ambassador Zexhai, his voice carrying across the chamber, is what are they planning? No species simply disappears without reason. If they've withdrawn from galactic society, they must be preparing for something. Perhaps they've discovered some technology, suggested Senator Vrex. Something that requires secrecy. Humans have always been surprisingly innovative for such a young species. Dr. Yelendra pulled up new data streams. That's what concerns me most. 3 months ago, we detected massive energy signatures from their home system. The readings were unlike anything in our databases. When we sent investigation teams, they found the entire Sol system surrounded by some kind of barrier. Our ships couldn't penetrate it, and all attempts at communication were ignored. The High Arbiter stood, her robes flowing around her tall frame. For 17 cycles, we've assumed they were simply busy with internal affairs. But this evidence suggests something far more significant. A species doesn't isolate itself unless it's either dying or preparing for war. War against whom? Asked Ambassador Thex, his mandibles clicking nervously. They have no known enemies. Their diplomatic relations were cordial with all council members. Even their territorial disputes were minor. That's exactly the problem, replied Zexhai, standing to address the chamber. We don't know what they're thinking. We don't know what they've discovered. We don't know what they're building behind that barrier. And we certainly don't know what they want. The chamber fell silent again as the implications sank in. The galaxy had grown comfortable with predictable patterns. Species that talked, negotiated, threatened, postured, but always communicated their intentions. Humanity's silence was more unsettling than any declaration of war. "I propose," said the High Arbiter, "that we consider this a potential security threat, not because we have evidence of hostile intent, but because we have no evidence of their intentions at all." Senator Vrex's deep voice rumbled through the chamber. "Are we seriously considering military action against a species that has done nothing but ignore us?" "The most dangerous enemy is the one whose plans you cannot predict," replied Ambassador Zexai. "Humans have always been unpredictable. Remember the Kepler station incident? They solved a problem in 6 hours that our best engineers said would take months. Or the trade negotiations with the Zephyrian clans. They found legal loopholes that had existed for centuries without anyone noticing." Dr. Yelendra added more disturbing data to the display. "There's more. We've detected unusual gravitational anomalies in systems near human space. Not natural phenomena, artificial gravity manipulations on a massive scale. Whatever they're doing, it's affecting space-time itself." The revelation sent shock waves through the assembled delegates. Gravity manipulation beyond basic ship propulsion was theoretical technology that even the oldest council races hadn't mastered. "How is that possible?" demanded Senator Vrex. "Their technology was barely advanced enough for council membership when they joined us." "That was 2 centuries ago," Dr. Yelendra reminded them. "We've been treating them as the galaxy's newcomers, but they've had time to develop, and apparently they've been doing so in directions we never anticipated." Ambassador Thex stood, his insected form trembling slightly. "My people have a saying, when the Quiet One finally speaks, everyone listens. But what happens when the Quiet One never speaks at all?" High Arbiter Kolthara called for order as the chamber erupted in concerned discussions. "The question before us is simple. Do we wait for humanity to reveal their intentions, or do we take action to protect ourselves from an unknown threat?" "What action?" asked Senator Vrex. "They've committed no hostile acts." "Haven't they?" countered Ambassador Zexai. "They've withdrawn from all treaties, ceased all trade, broken all diplomatic contact, and hidden their entire civilization behind some kind of barrier. If those aren't hostile acts, they're certainly not friendly ones." Dr. Yelendra brought up star charts showing human territory. "There's something else we must consider. Their silence isn't just affecting them, it's destabilizing the entire galactic economy. Human trade routes carried 30% of all interstellar commerce. Their sudden withdrawal has created shortages, price fluctuations, and transportation gaps across dozens of sectors. So they're damaging the galaxy without even trying," observed Ambassador Thex. "That might be worse than intentional hostility." The High Arbiter raised her primary arms for silence. "The evidence is clear. Humanity has withdrawn from galactic civilization, is developing unknown technologies, and their silence is causing economic disruption across multiple sectors. Whether their intentions are hostile or not, their actions are creating instability." Senator Vrex stood again, his massive frame dominating his section of the chamber. "But do we have the right to demand they rejoin galactic society? Species sovereignty has been a core principle of the Council since its founding." "Not when that sovereignty threatens the stability of the entire galaxy," replied Ambassador Zexai. "If they want to isolate themselves, that's their choice, but they don't have the right to do so in a way that damages everyone else." Dr. Yelendra highlighted specific data streams. "The gravitational anomalies are getting stronger. Whatever they're building, it's approaching completion. Our scientists estimate that within 6 months, their activities could begin affecting hyperspace lanes throughout this sector of the galaxy." The implications were staggering. Hyperspace routes were the lifeblood of galactic civilization. If humanity's mysterious activities disrupted faster-than-light travel, it could isolate entire star systems and collapse the galactic economy. "That decides it," said the High Arbiter firmly. "We cannot allow unknown activities to threaten the foundations of galactic civilization. I call for a preliminary vote on Resolution 847, authorization for Council intervention in human space." "Wait," interrupted Senator Vrex. "Intervention? Are we talking about invasion?" "We're talking about protection," replied Ambassador Zexai. "Protection of the galaxy from unknown threats, protection of trade routes from disruption, and protection of the principles that hold our civilization together." Dr. Yelendra pulled up more data. "The energy signatures from human space are growing exponentially, Whatever they're doing, it's accelerating. We may not have much time to make this decision." The chamber buzzed with urgent conversations as delegates consulted with their home governments through quantum communicators. The weight of the moment was not lost on anyone. This could be the beginning of the galaxy's first war in over 500 years. "The question," said Ambassador Thex quietly, "is whether we're preventing a war or starting one." High Arbiter Kolthara stood at the center of the chamber, watching the data streams that showed human space as a dark void on their sensors. 17 cycles of silence, 17 cycles of growing mystery, 17 cycles of increasing concern that had finally reached a breaking point. All those in favor of preliminary authorization for Council intervention in human space to investigate potential threats to galactic stability. The vote began, each delegate weighing the unprecedented decision. In the history of the Galactic Council, they had never voted to intervene in the affairs of a member species without clear evidence of wrongdoing. But they had also never faced a situation where a species simply vanished from galactic affairs while apparently developing technologies that could affect everyone else. As the votes were tallied, one thing became clear. Humanity's silence had accomplished what no threat or ultimatum ever could. It had pushed the Council to consider actions they never thought they would contemplate. The final tally appeared on the main display. Authorization approved by a margin of 67%. "Resolution 847 is hereby approved," announced the High Arbiter. "We will begin immediate preparations for a Council investigation fleet to enter human space and determine the nature of their activities." As delegates began filing out of the chamber, Dr. Yelendra remained at her console, studying the energy readings from human space. Something about the patterns bothered her, but she couldn't identify what. The signatures were unlike anything in their databases, but there was an underlying structure that seemed almost familiar. Whatever humanity was doing in their isolation, they would find out soon enough. The Council had made their decision, and now there was no turning back. In the depths of space, automated human ships continued their routes, silent and empty, while behind the barrier around Sol system, something vast and incomprehensible continued to take shape. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous thing about a species isn't what they say or do. It's what they don't say, and what they're doing while everyone else is trying to figure out why they're being so quiet. The Council had voted for intervention, but they had no idea they were about to discover that humanity's silence wasn't a preparation for war. It was preparation for something far more significant. Something that would change everything they thought they knew about their place in the universe. But first, they had to get through the barrier around human space, and that was going to prove far more difficult than anyone anticipated. Fleet Admiral Rick Thull stood on the bridge of the massive Council warship Unity's Voice Asterisk, watching his tactical display show the largest military force assembled in galactic history. 700 ships from 12 different species, representing the combined might of the Galactic Council, all moving toward human space with a single purpose. "Sir, we're approaching the outer marker of human territory," reported his navigation officer, a young Altarian whose scales showed the blue tinge of nervousness. "Still no response to our communication attempts." The Admiral's three eyes focused on the empty starfield ahead. For 50 years, he had commanded Council forces in various peacekeeping missions, but never anything like this. Usually they were called in to stop wars, not potentially start them. "Continue broadcasting on all frequencies," he ordered. "Make it clear we're here for investigation purposes only." His communications officer, a tentacled Mindari, looked up from her console with confusion. "Sir, we're detecting something unusual. Our broadcasts are being received. The signals aren't bouncing back as they would in empty space. But there's no acknowledgement, no return communication. It's as if someone is listening but choosing not to respond." Admiral Rick Thull had commanded enough military operations to know that deliberate silence was often more concerning than hostile chatter. An enemy who talked revealed their position, intentions, and state of mind. An enemy who stayed silent was impossible to predict. "Long-range sensors report," he commanded. Lieutenant Zalmora, a crystalline being from the Nexus worlds, manipulated her sensor array with practiced efficiency. "We're detecting the same barrier that previous investigation teams encountered. It appears to completely surround the Sol system at approximately 50 astronomical units from their primary star. Energy readings are unprecedented, sir. Define unprecedented. The barrier is generating more power than our entire fleet combined, but it doesn't appear to be a weapon. Sensor analysis suggests it's some kind of selective permeability field. Small objects pass through without interference, but anything larger than a fighter craft encounters increasing resistance. The Admiral studied the tactical display, noting how his massive fleet must look to any human observers. 700 ships arranged in precise formation, representing the military might of dozens of star systems. It was meant to be impressive, perhaps even intimidating, but if the humans were monitoring them, they gave no sign of concern. Have any of our scout ships attempted to penetrate the barrier? Yes, sir. 3 teams tried yesterday. The barrier doesn't harm ships or crew, but it becomes progressively more difficult to move forward. Our pilots reported feeling like they were trying to fly through thick liquid. All 3 teams had to turn back when their engines couldn't generate enough thrust to continue. Captain Velkin of the Vorthan Empire approached the Admiral's command station. As the Council's military liaison, she had been studying human capabilities for weeks in preparation for this mission. Admiral, I've been reviewing human military doctrine from their previous conflicts. They're not known for passive defense. Their typical response to overwhelming force is rapid, aggressive counterattack. This silence is completely contrary to their established patterns. What are you suggesting, Captain? Either this isn't a military situation at all, or they're so confident in their defenses that they don't consider our entire fleet a threat. The implications of that statement sent ripples of unease through the bridge crew. The idea that humanity might view the largest military force in galactic history as non-threatening was both impossible and terrifying. Sir, reported the communications officer, we're receiving a transmission. Every being on the bridge turned toward her station. After days of complete silence, any communication from human space was significant. Put it through. The voice that filled the bridge was unmistakably human, calm and clear, with the slight accent that Council linguists had identified as originating from Earth's North American continent. Council Fleet, this is Orbital Station 7. We are aware of your presence and appreciate your concern for galactic stability. However, we must inform you that entry to human space is currently restricted. We recommend you maintain your position and wait for further instructions. Admiral Rixthal stepped forward. This is Fleet Admiral Rixthal of the Galactic Council Investigation Force. We're here under Resolution 847 to investigate potential threats to galactic stability. We require immediate communication with human leadership. A pause followed, longer than normal communication delays would account for. Admiral Rixthal, we understand your concerns. A representative will be dispatched to meet with you shortly. Please maintain your current position. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence. That's it, asked Captain Velkin. No explanation, no justification, just wait for a representative. Lieutenant Zalmora looked up from her sensors with surprise. Sir, I'm detecting an object approaching our position. It's small, much smaller than any ship in our database. The tactical display updated to show a tiny craft, no larger than a shuttle, moving toward their massive fleet at incredible speed. How fast is it traveling? Demanded the Admiral. Approximately 30 times the maximum velocity of our fastest interceptors, sir. But that's impossible. Nothing that small could generate the power necessary for such speeds. Apparently it can, observed Captain Velkin dryly. The object slowed as it approached the Council fleet, finally coming to a complete stop just outside the formation. It was elegant and simple, a smooth ovoid shape with no visible weapons, engines, or external features of any kind. I'm receiving a docking request, reported the navigation officer with bewilderment. They want to come aboard. Admiral Rixthal had made thousands of command decisions in his career, but this felt different. Everything about this situation defied normal protocols and expectations. Grant the request, but maintain full security protocols. Minutes later, the Admiral found himself in the main docking bay, watching the strange human craft settle onto the deck with impossible silence. No engine noise, no cooling systems cycling down, no normal sounds of a ship completing a journey. The craft simply stopped. A section of the hull opened with the whisper-quiet precision of advanced technology, and a single human stepped out. She was younger than the Admiral had expected, perhaps 40 standard years, with dark hair and the calm expression of someone completely at ease despite being surrounded by representatives of 12 different alien species, all armed and clearly suspicious. "I'm Dr. Sarah Chen," she said, approaching the Admiral with an easy confidence that somehow made the massive alien beings around her seem less intimidating instead of more so. "I apologize for the delay in our response, but we've been rather busy." Admiral Rixthal drew himself up to his full height, which was considerable even among his own species. "Dr. Chen, I am Fleet Admiral Rixthal. The Galactic Council has serious concerns about human activities in this sector." "I imagine you do," she replied, seeming genuinely sympathetic. "The sudden change in our communication patterns has probably been quite confusing. Would you prefer to discuss this here, or shall we move somewhere more comfortable?" The casual tone was almost insulting. They had brought 700 warships to human space, and this woman was offering refreshments. "Doctor, perhaps you don't understand the seriousness of this situation. The Council has authorized investigation of your activities under suspicion that they pose a threat to galactic stability." Dr. Chen nodded thoughtfully. "Yes, I saw the authorization. Quite impressive legal work, actually. Your legislative teams found some very creative interpretations of Council law to justify this action." Captain Velkin stepped forward aggressively. "Are you mocking the Council?" "Not at all," Dr. Chen replied, her tone remaining perfectly pleasant. "I'm genuinely impressed. Creating legal justification for what is essentially a first-strike military action against a member species that has committed no hostile acts required considerable bureaucratic skill." The truth of her words hung in the air like an uncomfortable smell. Technically, humanity had done nothing wrong except stop talking to the rest of the galaxy. "Doctor," said Admiral Rixthal, "your species has withdrawn from all galactic activities, ceased all communication, and is apparently developing technologies that could affect the stability of local space. The Council has a right to investigate threats to galactic peace." "Do we pose a threat to galactic peace, Admiral?" The simple question was surprisingly difficult to answer. They had no evidence of hostile human activities, no attacks on other species, no territorial expansion, no threats of any kind. "You pose a threat through uncertainty," replied Captain Velkin. "No one knows what you're planning." "Ah," said Dr. Chen, as if a puzzle piece had just fallen into place. "I see the problem. You're concerned because you don't know what we're doing." "Exactly. And you believe you have the right to know what we're doing." "When it affects the rest of the galaxy, yes." Dr. Chen considered this for a moment, then smiled with what appeared to be genuine amusement. "Admiral, how much do you know about human history?" The change of subject was so unexpected that Rixthal found himself answering automatically. "The standard briefings. Your species developed space travel approximately 2 centuries ago, joined the Council shortly thereafter, generally peaceful but occasionally unpredictable." "That's the galactic perspective, yes. But before we reached the stars, we spent thousands of years learning some very difficult lessons about coexistence. One of the most important was this: the desire to control others, even when motivated by fear or good intentions, leads inevitably to conflict." "We're not trying to control you," protested Captain Velkin. "We're trying to protect the galaxy." "From what exactly? Have we attacked anyone? Have we made any threats? Have we taken any hostile actions whatsoever?" The uncomfortable silence that followed was answer enough. "You see," continued Dr. Chen, "you're here because our silence frightens you. But silence isn't aggression. Privacy isn't hostility. And the fact that you can't predict our actions doesn't mean those actions will be harmful." Lieutenant Zalmora, who had been monitoring her sensors throughout the conversation, suddenly looked up in alarm. "Admiral, I'm detecting massive energy buildups throughout human space. Multiple sources, all increasing exponentially." Dr. Chen glanced at a device on her wrist, a technology the Council's sensors couldn't even identify, and nodded. "Right on schedule. Admiral, I'm afraid we're going to need you to move your fleet to a safe distance." "Safe distance from what?" "Approximately 10 light-years should be sufficient." The bridge crew stared at her in shock. 10 light-years was an enormous distance in tactical terms, far beyond the range of any known weapon. "Doctor," said Admiral Rixthal slowly, "exactly what are you about to do?" "Something that will probably seem quite alarming if you don't understand the context, which is why I strongly recommend moving to that safe distance." Captain Velkin's aggressive posture returned full force. "Are you threatening us?" "Captain, if I wanted to threaten you, I would have done so before you brought 700 warships to our territory. What I'm doing is warning you, which is considerably more polite." The Admiral found himself in an impossible position. Retreat in the face of what might be a bluff would be humiliating and potentially dangerous, but ignore a warning that might be legitimate could be catastrophic. "Doctor, I need more information before I can make that decision." Dr. Chen checked her device again. "I understand, Admiral, but we're running out of time. In approximately 6 minutes, the project we've been working on for the past 17 cycles will reach completion. The energy release will be visible across several star systems, and I really don't want the Council to interpret it as an attack." "What project?" For the first time, Dr. Chen's composed demeanor cracked slightly, revealing something that looked almost like excitement. "We're moving our star." The words hung in the air like physical objects, impossible to process or believe. "Moving your star," repeated Admiral Rixthal slowly. "Yes, Sol, our primary star, along with all the planets and orbital installations in the system. We're relocating to a position approximately 50,000 light-years from here." The bridge fell completely silent, except for the humming of ship systems and the rapid breathing of several crew members, who were apparently having difficulty processing what they had just heard. "That's impossible," whispered Captain Velkin. "Actually, it's just very difficult," corrected Dr. Chen. "We've been working on the engineering challenges for quite some time now." Lieutenant Zalmora stared at her sensors in disbelief. The energy readings, if they're really doing what she claims, the power requirements would be approximately equivalent to the total energy output of this galaxy for several million years, finished Dr. Chen helpfully. Yes, that was the main technical hurdle. Admiral Rixthal felt the universe shift around him as the implications sank in. A species that could move entire star systems wasn't just advanced. They were operating on a level of technology that redefined what was possible. "Why?" he asked, the question emerging from somewhere deeper than military protocol or diplomatic necessity. Dr. Chen's expression softened, showing something that might have been sympathy. "Because we've learned that the galaxy is a very small place, Admiral. And when you share a small space with many different neighbors, sometimes the most polite thing to do is give everyone more room." The energy readings on Lieutenant Zalmora's sensors suddenly spiked beyond her instrument's ability to measure. "Admiral," Dr. Chen said urgently, "you really need to move your fleet, now." Admiral Rixthal gave the order to retreat, just as space itself began to change around them. The Council fleet's engines screamed as 700 ships simultaneously engaged maximum acceleration, racing away from human space as fast as their technology allowed. Behind them, the very fabric of reality was beginning to twist in ways that violated every known law of physics. "Report," demanded the Admiral, gripping his command console as the ship shuddered from gravitational waves unlike anything in their scientific databases. Lieutenant Zalmora's voice cracked with strain as she fought to interpret sensor readings that made no sense. "Sir, the barrier around human space is expanding. No, not expanding. Folding. Space is folding around the entire Sol system." On the main display, they watched something that would change galactic civilization forever. The star that humans called Sol, along with all 9 planets and countless orbital installations, was disappearing from normal spacetime. But it wasn't destruction. It was translation, movement on a scale that dwarfed every engineering project in galactic history. Dr. Chen's small craft had somehow kept pace with the retreating fleet, despite the massive gravitational distortions that were making normal space travel increasingly difficult. "Doctor," Admiral Rixthal spoke into his communicator, his voice tight with the strain of watching the impossible happen before his eyes. "Exactly how are you doing this?" Her response came through clearly, despite the fact that radio waves should have been distorted beyond recognition by the space-time disruption around them. It's actually quite elegant once you solve the fundamental engineering challenges, she replied, as if she were discussing routine ship maintenance instead of moving an entire star system. The key insight was realizing that space and time aren't separate things. They're different aspects of the same underlying structure. If you can manipulate that structure properly, you can essentially create a pocket of space-time that exists independently of the surrounding framework. Captain Velkin, who had been silent since the retreat began, finally found her voice. Doctor, the energy requirements for such an operation should be impossible to achieve. They would be using conventional power sources, but stars are quite convenient in that regard. They're essentially fusion reactors that have been running for billions of years. We simply learned how to tap into that energy more directly. The casual way she discussed manipulating stellar energy made every military officer on the bridge feel like children playing with toy weapons. Sir, reported the navigation officer, we've reached 10 light-years distance as recommended. The gravitational distortions are still affecting our instruments, but we should be safe from any immediate effects. Admiral Rick Thull studied the tactical display, which now showed a massive distortion in space where the Sol system used to be. His fleet, the pride of galactic military technology, looked pathetically small and primitive compared to what they were witnessing. Dr. Chen, may I ask why you're moving your entire star system? This seems like an extreme response to diplomatic tensions. There was a pause before she answered, and when she did, her voice carried a sadness that hadn't been there before. Admiral, in our history, we've learned that when different groups with vastly different capabilities try to share the same space, conflict is almost inevitable. The stronger group becomes afraid of the weaker group's potential, while the weaker group becomes resentful of the stronger group's advantages. Even when both sides have good intentions, fear and misunderstanding lead to violence. The truth of her words was uncomfortable, but undeniable. The Council fleet was here precisely because they were afraid of human potential. "So you're running away?" asked Captain Velkin, though her tone lacked the aggression it had carried earlier. "Not running away," corrected Dr. Chen. "Creating space. When we first achieved faster-than-light travel, we were excited to join the galactic community. We genuinely wanted to be part of something larger than ourselves. But over the past 2 centuries, we've observed the patterns of galactic politics, and we've recognized some troubling similarities to our own history." Lieutenant Zalmora looked up from her sensors with confusion. What similarities? The gradual concentration of power in the hands of the oldest and strongest civilizations. The way newer species are expected to conform to established patterns rather than develop their own paths. The assumption that galactic peace requires galactic control. Admiral Rick Thull felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental systems. "Are you saying the Council is corrupt?" "Not corrupt," Dr. Chen replied. "Just following a very old pattern that we've seen before in our own development. When fear becomes the primary motivation for policy decisions, even good people make choices that lead to oppression and conflict." The space around the former location of Sol's system was beginning to stabilize, but the readings were still unlike anything in Council databases. Whatever the humans had done, they had fundamentally altered the local structure of spacetime. "Doctor," asked Admiral Rick Thull, "where exactly are you going?" "We've identified a suitable location approximately 50,000 light-years from here, in a region with no known inhabited systems. Far enough away that our development won't threaten anyone, but close enough that we can maintain some contact if desired." "You're leaving the galaxy." "We're moving to a quieter neighborhood." The implications were staggering. Humanity was effectively withdrawing from galactic civilization entirely, taking their entire solar system with them. It was unprecedented, impossible, and completely effective as a solution to the diplomatic crisis that had brought the Council fleet here. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Zalmora, "the space-time distortion is collapsing. Whatever they did, it's finishing." On the main display, the twisted fabric of reality began to smooth out, leaving behind empty space where moments before an entire star system had existed. The gravitational signature that had marked Sol's position for billions of years was simply gone. "Incredible," whispered Captain Velkin. "They actually moved their entire star, not just the planets, not just their orbital installations, but the star itself." Admiral Rick Thull tried to process what he had witnessed. The largest military force in galactic history had been deployed to investigate a potential threat, and instead they had watched that potential threat simply leave the galaxy entirely. "Dr. Chen," he said into his communicator, "will we see you again?" "That depends, Admiral. The galaxy is welcome to contact us through the communication relay we're leaving behind. We're not cutting all ties. We're just creating enough distance that our different approaches to development won't threaten each other." Communication relay. A small automated station that will remain in this system. It can transmit messages across the distance we're traveling, though there will be a significant delay. Think of it as a forwarding address. Captain Velkin shook her head in amazement. "You planned this entire withdrawal just to avoid conflict with the Council." "Captain, we've studied the history of first contact situations throughout the galaxy. In 70% of cases involving species with significantly different technological capabilities, conflict occurs within the first 3 centuries of contact. We wanted to avoid becoming part of that statistic." The cold logic was undeniable, but Admiral Rickstull couldn't help feeling that something important was being lost. "Doctor, humanity has contributed a great deal to galactic civilization. Your scientific insights, your trade networks, your diplomatic innovations, all of that will be missed." "Thank you, Admiral. That means more than you might realize. But we've calculated that our continued presence would eventually lead to fear-based decision-making by the Council, which would in turn force us to take defensive actions that could be interpreted as aggressive. The situation that brought your fleet here was just the beginning of that cycle." Lieutenant Zalmora suddenly looked up from her console with alarm. "Sir, I'm detecting something else. Energy signatures from multiple human ships throughout the galaxy. It looks like they're collecting something." "Doctor," asked the Admiral. "Our people, Admiral, we're bringing everyone home. Every human colony, every research station, every deep space exploration vessel. No one gets left behind when we make this transition." The scale of the operation was breathtaking. Not only were they moving their home system, they were simultaneously retrieving every human presence throughout the galaxy. "How many people are we talking about?" asked Captain Velkin. "Approximately 57 billion across 400 colonies and installations. The coordination required has been challenging." Admiral Rickstull stared at the empty space where Saul had been, trying to comprehend what he had witnessed. An entire species, numbering in the tens of billions, had just voluntarily exiled themselves from galactic civilization to avoid the possibility of conflict. "Doctor, this seems like an extreme solution. Surely we could have found some way to coexist." "Admiral, with respect, you brought 700 warships to our space because we stopped returning your phone calls. That's not exactly a foundation for peaceful coexistence." The uncomfortable truth of her statement silenced the bridge crew. They had indeed responded to humanity's silence with overwhelming military force. "But you must understand our concerns," protested Captain Velkin. "Your technology was advancing rapidly, your capabilities were unknown, your intentions were unclear. And rather than ask us directly about our intentions, you voted to authorize military intervention," Dr. Chen interrupted gently. "Captain, that's exactly the pattern we were trying to avoid." "Sir," reported the communications officer, "we're receiving a final transmission from the communication relay they left behind." "Put it through." Dr. Chen's voice filled the bridge one last time, but now it carried the slight distortion that indicated she was speaking from an enormous distance. "Council Fleet, this is Dr. Sarah Chen, transmitting from our new location. The transition is complete, and all human personnel have been successfully relocated. We want to thank you for your patience during this process, and we hope the galaxy will find the peace we've all been seeking." Admiral Rickstull stepped forward. "Doctor, will you be monitoring galactic affairs from your new location?" "To some extent, yes. We're still part of the same universe, Admiral. If the galaxy ever faces a threat that requires our assistance, the communication relay will ensure you can reach us. But for day-to-day affairs, we'll be developing independently." "And if we want a visit?" There was a long pause before she answered. "You're welcome to try, Admiral, but the journey to our new location would take approximately 50,000 years using your current technology. We'd be happy to receive visitors, but you might want to work on your faster-than-light capabilities first." The transmission ended, leaving the Council fleet alone in empty space, staring at the spot where an entire star system used to be. "Admiral," asked Lieutenant Zalmura quietly, "what do we do now?" Rixthul considered the question carefully. They had come here to investigate a potential threat to galactic stability, but the threat had resolved itself by simply leaving. The humans had withdrawn from galactic affairs so completely that they were no longer even in the same region of space. "We report back to the Council," he said finally, "and we try to explain that the threat we were sent to investigate wasn't actually a threat at all." "Sir," added Captain Velkin, "what about the precedent this sets? What if other species decide to solve their political problems by moving their entire star systems?" Admiral Rixthul looked at the empty space around them, considering the engineering capability required to move a star. "Captain, if any other species in the galaxy has the technology to relocate their entire solar system to avoid political difficulties, they probably have the wisdom not to need such drastic measures." As the Council fleet began its journey back to galactic civilization, the communication relay left behind by humanity transmitted its first automated message to Council headquarters. It was simple, direct, and somehow both reassuring and unsettling. "Humanity has successfully relocated to avoid potential conflicts with galactic civilization. We remain available for emergency consultation, but will no longer participate in routine galactic affairs. Thank you for your understanding. Please update your star charts accordingly." The galaxy had just become a much larger and much lonelier place. But for the first time in centuries, the Galactic Council would have to consider the possibility that their approach to maintaining peace might need some fundamental adjustments. After all, when a species chooses to move their entire star system rather than deal with your politics, it might be time to examine whether your politics are the real problem. 3 months after humanity's departure, the Galactic Council found itself facing a crisis unlike any in their 3,000-year history. The emergency session hall was packed beyond capacity, with delegates standing in aisles and overflow crowds watching through quantum feeds from their home systems. High Arbiter Kulthara stood at the center of the chamber, her forearms gesturing toward data displays that showed the cascading effects of humanity's withdrawal from galactic civilization. "Trade route collapse in the outer rim sectors has reached 67%, she announced, her voice carrying the strain of weeks without proper rest. 17 star systems have declared economic emergency status. The Altarian Republic reports that supply shortages are causing civil unrest on 12 of their colonies." Senator Vrex of the Altarians stood, his massive frame trembling with barely controlled anger. "This is exactly what we should have expected. Humans were deliberately positioned as critical nodes in our trade networks. Their withdrawal wasn't random. It was calculated to cause maximum economic disruption." The accusation sent ripples of concerned conversation through the chamber. If humanity had deliberately engineered their withdrawal to damage the galactic economy, it would represent the most sophisticated act of economic warfare in recorded history. Dr. Yelendra from the Scientific Consortium tentacled her way to her speaking position, carrying data tablets that seemed to weigh her down with their troubling contents. "Senator Vrex raises an important point," she said, her voice carrying across the chamber. "But my analysis suggests the situation is more complex. Human involvement in galactic trade routes wasn't planned by them, it was planned by us." The chamber fell silent as the implications of her statement sank in. "Explain," demanded Ambassador Zexhai of the Vorthan Empire. 2 centuries ago, when humanity first achieved faster-than-light travel, we made deliberate policy decisions to integrate them into galactic trade networks as quickly as possible. The reasoning was sound. Rapid economic integration would give them too much to lose to ever consider aggressive actions against established civilizations. Dr. Yelendra activated her data displays, showing the gradual expansion of human involvement in galactic commerce over 2 centuries. What we didn't anticipate was how efficiently they would optimize those trade routes. Humans have a remarkable talent for finding more efficient solutions to logistical problems. Within 50 years, they had streamlined our trading networks to a degree that made their involvement essential rather than merely beneficial. Ambassador Thex clicked his mandibles nervously. "Are you saying we made ourselves dependent on them accidentally?" "Not accidentally," replied Dr. Yelendra. We made policy decisions based on the assumption that economic dependence would ensure political cooperation. We just underestimated how much more efficient they would make our systems. The revelation was disturbing on multiple levels. The Council had deliberately created economic dependence as a control mechanism, but humanity had turned that dependence into mutual reliance without anyone realizing it was happening. There's more, Dr. Yelendra continued. Analysis of the human withdrawal shows they took extensive measures to minimize economic disruption. They maintained automated trade shipments for several months after their departure, gave advance notice to their major trading partners, and provided detailed transfer protocols for maintaining their optimized routes. Then why are we experiencing economic collapse? Demanded Senator Vrex. Because we can't replicate their efficiency, she admitted. The route optimizations they developed required computational capabilities that we're only now beginning to understand. Without their systems management, our trade networks have reverted to their pre-human efficiency levels, which are insufficient to support current population and industrial demands. The chamber erupted in angry discussions as the full scope of the problem became clear. Humanity hadn't deliberately sabotaged the galactic economy. They had improved it so much that their absence left everyone else unable to maintain the higher standard of living they had created. Captain Velkin, recently returned from the failed investigation mission, requested permission to speak. High Arbiter, there's something else the Council needs to consider. During our encounter with Dr. Chen, she made several statements about Council policies that deserve serious examination. Proceed, Captain. She suggested that our response to their silence, deploying 700 warships to investigate, was exactly the kind of fear-based decision-making that they were trying to avoid by withdrawing from galactic civilization. Ambassador Zexhai stood aggressively. Are you suggesting the Council acted improperly? I'm suggesting we proved her point, replied Captain Velkin calmly. A member species stopped communicating for less than 2 standard years, and our response was to authorize military intervention. If we apply that precedent consistently, any species that values privacy over transparency could face Council fleet action. The uncomfortable truth of her statement sent waves of unease through the chamber. Many of the smaller member civilizations suddenly realized that their own sovereignty might be more fragile than they had assumed. High Arbiter Kolthara called for order as debates broke out across the chamber. The question before us now is not whether our previous decisions were correct, but how we address the current situation. We have economic crisis in multiple sectors, potential precedent problems with our sovereignty policies, and the knowledge that a member species felt it necessary to leave the galaxy entirely to avoid conflict with us. Senator Vrex stood again, his voice carrying new uncertainty. Are we even sure they've actually left the galaxy? Moving an entire star system is supposed to be impossible. How do we know this isn't some elaborate deception? Dr. Yelendra consulted her data tablets. Our deep space monitoring stations have tracked the gravitational anomaly associated with their relocation. It's currently approximately 37,000 light-years from its original position and continuing to move away from galactic center. Spectral analysis confirms it's the same stellar signature as Sol. So they really did it, whispered Ambassador Thex. They actually moved their entire star system. Not just moved it, corrected Dr. Yelendra. They've been sending additional data through the communication relay they left behind. Their new location is in a region of space that was previously thought to be uninhabitable, too far from other stars to support conventional space travel between systems. But they've apparently solved that problem. Captain Velkin leaned forward with interest. How? According to their data, they're no longer dependent on naturally occurring hyperspace lanes for faster-than-light travel. They've developed the ability to create artificial hyperspace corridors wherever they need them. The implications were staggering. If humanity could create faster-than-light pathways at will, they were no longer bound by the natural structure of space that limited every other spacefaring civilization. That's impossible, protested Senator Vrex. Hyperspace corridors form naturally at specific gravitational stress points. You can't just create them artificially. Apparently you can, replied Dr. Yelendra, if you have sufficient understanding of space-time manipulation. The same technology that allowed them to move their star system also allows them to create temporary pathways through hyperspace. Ambassador Zexhai stood slowly, his crystalline breathing apparatus cycling faster than normal. Are we beginning to understand the scope of human technological capability? I don't think we're even close to understanding it, admitted Dr. Yelendra. The energy requirements for their star relocation project exceeded our most optimistic estimates of what was theoretically possible. Either they've developed power generation techniques beyond our current understanding of physics, or they've found ways to manipulate energy that make our current models obsolete. The chamber fell silent as delegates contemplated the implications. Humanity hadn't just left galactic civilization. They had demonstrated technological capabilities that made them potentially the most advanced species anyone had ever encountered. "So what do we do now?" asked Ambassador Thex quietly. High Arbiter Kolthara activated the main display, showing a map of the galaxy with human trade routes highlighted in red. The network of connections was more extensive than anyone had realized, touching virtually every major star system in Council space. "We adapt," she said simply. "We acknowledge that our policies may have contributed to this situation. We work to minimize the economic disruption their absence has created, and we consider what changes might be necessary to prevent similar situations in the future." "And if they decide to return?" asked Captain Velkin. "Do you think that's likely, Captain?" Velkin considered the question carefully. "Based on my interaction with Dr. Chen, I believe they're genuinely committed to their new path. They didn't seem angry or resentful, just determined to develop independently. I suspect the only thing that might bring them back would be a galaxy-wide crisis that threatened everyone." Senator Vrex huffed dismissively. "What kind of crisis could threaten the entire galaxy, and what could humans do about it that we couldn't handle ourselves?" Dr. Yelendra looked up from her data tablets with a troubled expression. "Senator, based on what we've learned about their capabilities, I'm not sure there are many problems they couldn't solve that we could. The technology required to move a star system suggests they operate on a level that's fundamentally different from anything in our experience." "Are you saying they're superior to us?" demanded Ambassador Zexhai. "I'm saying they're different from us," she replied carefully. "Their approach to problem-solving, their technological development, their social organization, it's all evolved in directions that we never anticipated. Whether that makes them superior or just alien is a question I can't answer." Captain Velkin stood to address the chamber. "High Arbiter, I request permission to share something Dr. Chen told me during our encounter that might be relevant to this discussion." "Granted." She said that humanity had studied the history of first contact situations throughout the galaxy, and that in 70% of cases involving species with significantly different capabilities, conflict occurs within 3 centuries of contact. The statistic hung in the air like a physical weight. "She also said," continued Captain Velkin, "that they calculated their continued presence would eventually lead to fear-based decision-making by the Council, which would force them to take defensive actions that could be interpreted as aggressive." Senator Vrex stood slowly. "Are you saying they predicted we would respond to their silence with military force?" "I'm saying they planned their entire withdrawal strategy around the assumption that we would eventually view them as a threat simply because we couldn't predict or control their actions." The uncomfortable truth was that humanity's prediction had been completely accurate. The Council had indeed responded to their silence with exactly the kind of fear-based military intervention they had been trying to avoid. High Arbiter Kolthara looked around the chamber, nodding the subdued expressions on faces that had been angry and defiant just hours earlier. "It appears," she said quietly, "that humanity may have understood galactic politics better than we understood ourselves." Dr. Yil-Andra consulted her data tablets one final time. "High Arbiter, there's one more piece of information from the communication relay that the Council should know about." "Proceed." "They've sent us their research data on hyperspace lane optimization, alternative energy sources, and improved agricultural techniques. Enough information to help us address the economic problems caused by their departure." The gesture was unexpected and profound. Even while withdrawing from galactic civilization, humanity had tried to minimize the problems their absence would create. "Why would they do that?" asked Ambassador Thex. "According to their message," replied Dr. Yelendra, "because they genuinely want the galaxy to prosper even without their direct involvement. Senator Vrex sat down heavily, his anger finally giving way to something that might have been shame. So they left to avoid conflict, tried to minimize the economic damage their departure would cause, and then sent us solutions to the remaining problems. That appears to be accurate, confirmed Dr. Yelendra. The chamber remained silent for a long time as delegates processed the full scope of what had happened. The Council had responded to perceived threats with military force, while humanity had responded to actual threats with engineering solutions and voluntary exile. "High Arbiter," said Captain Velkin finally, "I believe we need to seriously consider whether our current approach to maintaining galactic peace is actually effective." "What are you suggesting, Captain?" "I'm suggesting that maybe the species we were most afraid of was also the one most committed to avoiding violence. And maybe that should tell us something about the difference between actual threats and imagined ones." As the council session continued deep into the night, one thing became increasingly clear. Humanity's silent departure had forced the galaxy to confront uncomfortable truths about fear, control, and the real meaning of galactic peace. The question now was whether the Council would learn from those truths, or repeat the same mistakes with the next species that chose to develop in directions they didn't understand. In the depths of space, 50,000 light-years away, humanity continued their work in splendid isolation, building something new and unprecedented, while the galaxy they had left behind struggled to understand what they had lost. And perhaps more importantly, what they needed to change about themselves to ensure that no other species would ever feel the need to move their entire star system just to find peace. 5 years after humanity's departure, the galaxy had settled into an uneasy new rhythm. The economic disruptions had been largely resolved using the technological solutions humans had provided, though trade efficiency remained below pre-departure levels. More importantly, the Galactic Council had instituted significant policy reforms aimed at preventing future situations where member species felt the need to exile themselves entirely. High Arbiter Colthara, now in her final term before retirement, stood in the observation deck of Council Station Alpha, looking out at stars that seemed somehow dimmer since humanity's absence. The automated communication relay that maintained contact with the human colonies had become one of the most closely monitored systems in galactic space. "High Arbiter," came a voice behind her. She turned to see Dr. Yelendra approaching, her tentacles carrying a data tablet that seemed to pulse with urgent information. "Dr. Yelendra, what brings you here so late?" "We've received a transmission through the human relay," she replied, her voice tight with concern. "Not an automated message like the quarterly status updates. This was sent directly from their leadership." Colthara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's environmental systems. In 5 years, humanity had maintained contact only through automated systems that provided basic information about their status and continued availability for emergency consultation. Direct communication from their leadership could only mean something significant had happened. "What does the message say?" Dr. Yelendra consulted her tablet, reading the message that had traveled 50,000 light-years to reach them. It's addressed to the Galactic Council leadership from someone identified as Director General Sarah Chen, apparently the same Dr. Chen who met with Admiral Rick Thull during the departure incident. The message is brief. "Council leadership, we have detected a significant anomaly approaching your galactic region from extragalactic space. Initial analysis suggests this represents a potential threat to all inhabited systems. Please advise if Council wishes to discuss coordination of response efforts." The High Arbiter stared at the message display, trying to process the implications. Humanity had been silent for 5 years except for routine status updates, and their first direct communication was a warning about a threat approaching from outside the galaxy. "What kind of anomaly?" she asked. "The message includes preliminary sensor data," Dr. Yelendra replied, manipulating her tablet to display the attached information. "Energy signatures consistent with artificial construction, massive in scale, and moving toward our galaxy at approximately 10% of light speed." "Artificial construction? Are we talking about a ship?" "If it is a ship, it's larger than anything in our databases. The energy signature suggests something roughly the size of a small moon, but with power output equivalent to a star." Colthara felt the universe shift around her again, just as it had 5 years ago when humanity announced they were moving their solar system. The idea of an artificial construct the size of a moon, powered by stellar-level energy, approaching their galaxy was beyond terrifying. How did humans detect this when our own long-range sensors haven't picked up anything? Dr. Yelendra hesitated before answering. According to the technical data they included, their new location gives them a much clearer view of extragalactic space than we have from within the galaxy. But more importantly, their sensor capabilities appear to have advanced significantly since their departure. How significantly? Their detection range appears to be several orders of magnitude greater than our best systems. They're tracking this object from a distance where our sensors couldn't detect anything at all. The implications were staggering. Not only had humanity continued their technological development during their exile, but they had apparently made advances that left the rest of galactic civilization even further behind. Dr. Yelendra, I need you to call an emergency session of the Security Council. All senior members maximum priority. Yes, High Arbiter. Should I also request that Admiral Rixthul return from his patrol assignment? Immediately, and Dr. Yelendra, send a response to Director General Chen. Tell her the Council accepts her offer to discuss coordination. 3 hours later, the Security Council chamber was filled with familiar faces, showing unfamiliar expressions of concern. The same delegates who had debated humanity's withdrawal now found themselves faced with the possibility that they might need humanity's help. Admiral Rixthul stood at the main display, reviewing the sensor data that humanity had provided through their communication relay. The object is definitely artificial, he announced, his voice carrying the authority of 50 years of military experience. Energy patterns are too regular and focused to be natural phenomena. Construction appears to be metallic, possibly some kind of advanced composite material. Senator Vrex, who had been humanity's harshest critic during the departure crisis, leaned forward in his seat. How can you be sure it's a threat? It might be an exploration vessel from another galaxy. Senator, replied Admiral Rixthul, exploration vessels don't typically require stellar-level power sources. This thing is generating enough energy to power our entire galactic civilization. Either it's running some kind of industrial operation, or it's carrying weapons systems beyond our current understanding. Captain Velkin, now promoted to Strategic Intelligence Director, activated additional displays showing trajectory analysis. Based on the course projections humans provided, this object will enter our galaxy in approximately 18 standard months. Its trajectory takes it through the galactic core region before continuing toward the outer spiral arms, where most inhabited systems are located. Could it be heading for a specific target? Asked Ambassador Zexai. Unknown. The trajectory could be interpreted as either a survey route that would take it past major population centers, or a systematic approach designed to maximize contact with inhabited systems. Dr. Yelendra stood to present her analysis. I've been studying the technical specifications that humanity included with their warning. Their sensor capabilities allow them to detect details about this object that our systems couldn't resolve even if we knew exactly where to look. What details? Demanded the High Arbiter. Internal structure analysis suggests the object contains multiple artificial environments, possibly designed to support biological life. Energy distribution patterns indicate numerous powered systems throughout the structure. Most concerning, they've detected what appear to be launch bays capable of deploying smaller craft. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. An artificial construct the size of a moon, carrying multiple environments and capable of deploying smaller vessels, approaching their galaxy with enormous power reserves. It's not an exploration vessel, said Admiral Rixthul grimly. It's a colony ship or an invasion fleet. Senator Vrex shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Even if that's true, we have defensive capabilities. The combined fleets of all council members could mount a significant resistance. Against what? Asked Captain Velkin. We don't know their technology level, their weapons capabilities, or even their intentions. For all we know, this could be a civilization that makes humanity look primitive. Speaking of humanity, interjected Ambassador Zexai, what exactly are they proposing in terms of coordination? They've been isolated for 5 years. What could they possibly offer that we couldn't handle ourselves? The question hung in the air like a challenge, but it was Admiral Rixthal who answered. 5 years ago, they demonstrated the ability to move an entire star system. If their technological development has continued at the same pace, they might have capabilities we can't even imagine. Dr. Yelendra consulted her tablet. Actually, there's additional information in their message that addresses that question. They're offering to share advanced sensor data about the approaching object, provide tactical analysis based on their observations, and if necessary, direct military assistance. Military assistance? Asked Senator Vrex with surprise. From a species that exiled themselves to avoid conflict. Apparently, replied Dr. Yelendra, they distinguish between conflicts over political differences and defense against external threats to galactic civilization. High Arbiter Kolthara stood, drawing attention from the entire chamber. The decision before us is simple. Do we accept human assistance in addressing this potential threat, or do we attempt to handle it independently? What would accepting their assistance entail? Asked Ambassador Zexhai. Unknown until we respond to their offer. But given their demonstrated capabilities, I suspect they could provide valuable intelligence and potentially effective defensive options. Captain Velkin activated new displays showing current Council fleet positions. High Arbiter, I've been analyzing our defensive capabilities against an unknown threat of this magnitude. Our combined fleets could mount a coordinated defense, but without knowing the technological capabilities of whatever is approaching, we're essentially planning blind. And humanity could change that. Their sensor data is already far superior to anything we can obtain independently. Their tactical analysis might identify weaknesses or patterns we couldn't detect, and if their military capabilities have advanced as much as their other technologies. She didn't finish the sentence, but the implication was clear. Humanity might represent the difference between successful defense and galactic catastrophe. Senator Vrex stood slowly, his massive frame showing the weight of a difficult decision. 5 years ago, I argued that humanity was a threat to galactic stability. I was wrong. If we face a real threat now, pride shouldn't prevent us from accepting help from the most technologically advanced civilization we've ever encountered. The admission was significant coming from humanity's former critic. It seemed to influence other delegates who had been uncertain about accepting help from their former colleagues. Dr. Yelendra, said the High Arbiter, send a response to Director General Chen. Tell her the Galactic Council formally requests coordination and assistance in addressing this potential threat. Yes, High Arbiter. Should I include any specific requests for information or capabilities? Ask them to provide everything they're willing to share. Technical analysis, tactical recommendations, strategic options, whatever they think might be helpful. As Dr. Yelendra prepared the transmission, Admiral Rixthal studied the projected trajectory of the approaching object. High Arbiter, there's something else we should consider. If this object represents a hostile force, it's approaching from the direction of humanity's new location. They might be the first target. The realization sent a chill through the chamber. Humanity had exiled themselves to avoid conflict with galactic civilization, only to potentially position themselves as the first line of defense against an external threat. That might explain why they're offering assistance, observed Captain Velkin. They have as much to lose as we do, possibly more. The transmission was sent, beginning a new chapter in human-galactic relations that none of them had anticipated. For 5 years, humanity had existed in voluntary isolation, developing their capabilities while maintaining polite distance from their former colleagues. Now, faced with a potential threat that could endanger all intelligent life in the galaxy, the two civilizations would need to work together again. The question was whether 5 years of separation had changed both sides enough to make cooperation possible, or whether old patterns of fear and misunderstanding would interfere with their ability to mount an effective defense. In the depths of space, 50,000 light-years away, humanity was asking themselves the same questions while they watched something massive and unknown approach their galaxy with intentions that remained utterly mysterious. The age of isolation was ending, but what would replace it remained to be seen. 3 days later, the response from humanity arrived with unprecedented detail and disturbing revelations that would change everything the galaxy thought they knew about the approaching threat. and about humanity's development during their years of exile. The galaxy was about to learn that, when humans said they had been rather busy, they had been engaging in the kind of understatement that could only come from a species that considered moving star systems to be routine engineering projects. What they had built in 5 years of isolation would either save galactic civilization or redefine what galactic civilization meant entirely. But first, they all had to survive what was coming from the dark between galaxies. And that was going to require the kind of cooperation that had seemed impossible just a few days earlier, but was now the only option any of them had.